What do you think this is, huh? Some kind of
Super Smash Brothers!
Did somebody say
Super Smash Brothers!
Hey everyone, it's a
Super Smash Brothers!
Get off my set! This is not working!
The Super Smash Bros. Movie, the Super Mario Galaxy movie has arrived. And of course people are talking about how crazy it is. Also another thing, but we'll get to that in a moment. In spite of my situation, I was able to see it in a nearby theater, and I will say that it was fairly satisfying. Not as good as the first film, but still entertaining enough. It feels like a proper continuation of the story of the first film. It carries over the development of the characters and expands on their personalities with really fun interactions between the cast. I'm also really thankful that it avoids the usual tropes you see in these sort of movies, like when they do a random third act breakup for no reason. It helps the plot to feel more refreshed and focused. The music is also good. There's all sorts of beautiful reorchestrations of classic songs from the games and even some really good original scores. And it also doesn't have forced pop songs like the first movie did. It also has a nice sense of humor. There's so many good bits in this movie that utilize the characters and their environments to tell some funny jokes. The stuff with Bowser in particular is so good, being a silly sidekick and a supportive father who wants to ham up his theatrics in a satisfying way. There's also an interesting method in which he turns back to villainy by reconnecting with his son and getting in touch with his traditional roots. It doesn't feel manipulative and cheap, and it makes for a natural return to his role as a bad guy. It also wouldn't be a Mario movie unless they made references to the games. And thankfully, like the first movie, they're incorporated properly without being abused and desperate. Stuff like the map montage where Peach leaves them to look over the kingdom, or the really fun 8-bit security level. They feel like faithful treats for Mario fans while still telling a story that doesn't break up the plot. One thing I'm sure a lot of people were worried about was how they were gonna handle Peach and Rosalina, since Peach is more action-oriented in this movie and Rosalina is voiced by Brie Larson. But they did do a good job being faithful to the original characters, even though they do end up using Rosalina as a plot device. She's still a soft motherly figure to the Lumas, and I do have to admit that Larson did a pretty good job portraying that side of her personality. Peach also has really good variety to her character instead of just being a girl boss. I really love how they made her more characterized and gave her more urgency in the story instead of just being there for the sake of being there. Probably because of a certain plot twist that comes up later that I'd rather not spoil for anyone who hasn't seen it. Overall, it is a fun movie, even if it has its issues. The pacing in particular is really fast this time, not properly building up some of its plot points. Like that big reveal with Peach just sort of happens and they move on to the next scene abruptly. You'd think they would have held on to her reaction or have her more emotional after such a drastic reveal. But no, they just cut to Bowser and Jr. powering up their Death Star cannon. Honestly, that's really disrespectful of Peach's character in spite of them trying to make her more three-dimensional. The same thing happens with Bowser heroically offering himself to the Queen Bee as a sign of friendship towards Mario, only to immediately be abducted by Jr. and get talked back into being a villain. There's so many instances where an obstacle is presented to the heroes and a solution just pops in out of the blue so they can go to the next scene. It hardly leaves room for the audience to breathe, and can seriously break the immersion. I also personally really don't like how they just skip over Sunshine and go straight to the Galaxy movies because it would be more marketable. I get that Sunshine isn't as beloved as other 3D Mario games, but it feels like a really drastic leap for this franchise to make. First they're in a magic kingdom on Earth, and now they're suddenly doing outer space stuff. It just feels like they completely disregarded Sunshine with no in-between build-up to the Galaxy games. But these problems are reasonably small compared to the bigger picture. It's still a fun movie and shows that Illumination has a pretty solid understanding of the source material, except for some really troubling signs that they want to make a Smash Bros. Movie, or at least trying to. And there's so many problems with this. Now your first impression of this might be, oh come on, there's no harm in referencing other Nintendo franchises, and it's true. It's not a problem for them to just reference other Nintendo franchises, except they're not references. Illumination is actively placing them into the universe of these Mario movies. In the first movie it made sense for them to include Donkey Kong because Donkey Kong was established to be a Mario character, but now they have to include characters like Rob or the Pikmin or Mr. Game & Watch, which just raises a lot of questions. Why are the Pikmin in this movie? Is Olimar in the Mario universe too? And why is Rob in the movie when they could have just used an old slow man to do that bit in the register? It would have had the same impact. And why does Junior's paintbrush have the ability to summon Mr. Game & Watch? Why didn't he just do that from the start to defeat Mario and Luigi? And you might be thinking, oh, they're only in the movie for like 10 seconds each. There's no harm in simply having them in the background for a small amount of time, right? Well, I guess it's okay. But then Illumination decided to do this. Yes, they actually did this. They took Star Fox, the main protagonist of a completely different IP, and put him into the Super Mario movie. Why? Because it's an outer space movie and they thought they were being cheeky with this tie-in? And it's not like the other tie-in characters where you could look away for a couple of seconds and you miss it. No, no, no. They make him into a main character in the movie. He is essential to the plot and gets screen time throughout the entire half of the film. And for good measure, they make references to alternate universes. Why is Star Fox here when they could have just gotten the Lumas to make more of those launch stars? They have the ability to travel to other planets and one of them knows where they live. It is such a stupid-ass excuse for them to throw Star Fox into this movie. And when you combine Star Fox being a major character with the other cameos from Pikmin, Rob, and Mr. Game & Watch, it is abundantly clear that they're trying to set groundwork for a Smash Bros. Movie. Maybe this would have worked in the days of yore when there was only 10 IPs in the roster, not today when they had to get Disney's permission to include Sora. Smash Brothers consists of dozens, possibly hundreds of video game franchises. It would be completely impossible to make that kind of movie without overcrowding the cast. Not to mention how it would feel extremely try-hard and desperate, like how Ready Player One couldn't go 10 seconds without shouting, "Oh, look at those beloved childhood icons in the background." A movie like this would be completely bloated to the point it wouldn't be an authentic film franchise. It would just be Nintendo the movie. It's easier to do this in a video game because there's more time to build on it without having to make some sort of deep explanation for how all these franchises can coexist with each other. A movie would average at 1 hour and 20 minutes to just over 2 hours in length. That's not enough time to establish all these universes and all these different characters. Even if you don't have a problem with an overstuffed cast, it still ruins the tone. What would the plot even be? Would it just be those fan theories where it's a kid playing with his toys like the Lego movie? Would it be like Ultimate where they have to team up against God? Both of these things would drastically shift the focus from Mario and just turn it into an animated MCU. Doing this would completely go against why people like these movies and why they watch them in the first place. The first movie wasn't trying to be this huge connected universe like a lot of other stuff is trying to do these days. It was a simple, lighthearted adaptation of a classic video game. A Smash Bros. Movie would be way too complicated and ruin the simplicity established in the first film. Even if they went by a plan like this and made a movie for each IP before working on a Smash Bros. Movie, it would still make the Mario movies into something more cliche and less special. It also creates a huge problem by eliminating the idea of these movies just being their own thing. Sure, we can have a Donkey Kong movie or a Zelda movie, maybe even an Urban Fighter movie, like who gives a shit at that point. But making it so they have to interconnect with each other into this bigger plot where you have to see everything in order to understand what's going on, sounds like a video game series where games crucial to understanding the plot are split between 7 different consoles. Hey, what's Kingdom Hearts doing here? And each of these IPs have a vastly different tone that would probably not fit together if a crossover was taking place in a cinematic medium. Oh boy, look at Mario and his pals having silly, fun-filled adventures. Yeah, good old family fun. Meanwhile, Star Fox is dealing with PTSD from his father's death while fighting a bloody galactic war against a fascist tyrant. All of these Nintendo IPs aren't compatible with each other because of how different they are dramatically. But let's just say you're okay with Pikachu having a conversation with Dracula. It still doesn't get rid of the whole, you need to see this in order to understand this problem with this idea. There's no guarantee that everyone is going to see every single one of these movies, much less if it's Illumination making them. People who don't come into this movie with all the necessary knowledge will be completely lost. The same bullshit happened to Star Wars after Disney bought it. It turned into this needlessly complicated connected cinematic universe where, unlike before Disney where you could easily ignore the comics and games, you need to see all this extra stuff in order to understand the plot of the upcoming Mandalorian movie. Maybe I'll make a video about this someday, or I'll just leave it in the back burner of my brain where it kinda just stays there. But it needs to be said that the MCU is probably one of the absolute worst influences in pop culture. It poisoned people's minds into thinking everything has to be some sort of magnum opus of different IPs and characters clashing with each other, with the fate of the universe in the balance. It warps the way people approach stories. Like everything has to be this giant mix and match in order to grab people's attention when it would just make the industry more homogenized and dour, because everything just amounts to the exact same thing. And that's not even getting into the disastrous possibility of someone other than Sakurai directing this movie, which is really likely since he just wants to relax and retire after the passion and hard work he put into Ultimate. And lastly, do you really think they would do this because they have an interesting story in mind, and genuinely want to explore how these characters would develop through interacting with each other? No, of fucking course not. They just want to make money off a highly successful and popular established IP because that's always the reason they do this garbage these days. It's not even like Illumination and Universal were subtle about how they did this. They literally used Star Fox appearing in the movie as a marketing stunt in the last 2 weeks leading up to the film's release in theaters, instead of, I don't know, keeping it a secret until the release date. Like, why does everything have to be interconnected and super epic now? Can't we just let something be its own thing? Everyone these days is just just trying to be the next Marvel, something that has become so cloying and out of hand that even Marvel themselves tried to get in on it and failed. Just stop with the cinematic universes already. Just make a Mario movie franchise and keep it a Mario movie franchise. Because the last thing anyone wants is a cinematic version of Mario getting gutted by Sephiroth.